to the second, to becoming an instructor with New Camp. And also teaching the job hunting bootcamp with us. So we'll actually go through all that together. Before that, a little bit of housekeeping. As you know, we are broadcasting on 3 platforms right now, live. So we're live on YouTube, we're live on Facebook, we're live on LinkedIn. You can ask your questions on any of those platforms. Type your question and we'll see them pop right here. And Brad and I will answer your questions as they come in. You can also join. You may actually not know that, but that's kind of a funny way to join us and ask your question. If you click that link, maybe type it in, url.newcamp.co/dial-in, you can join using your computer or your phone, camera on, microphone on, and you can actually join us on this floor and ask your questions live with us. That'll be a fun way to actually interact with you as well. So don't hesitate to do that. Last housekeeping, I was given a challenge last week to actually mimic how Beyonce will actually go over her fear and create a persona for herself that will be a strong and bold person. And the challenge was, can I do it? And so, yes, today I am Louis Fierce. And that's going to be for today only, I guess. But yeah, so hello, everyone. Hey, Albert, good to see you. That's Drew. I know it's Drew. Hey, Daria, good to see you as well. Juan, good to see you. Mikal, good to see you. All right, so hey, Brad, why don't you introduce yourself if you don't mind, and maybe go back to, when did you join New Camp as a student? Which boot camp did you do? And maybe briefly actually let us know where you are right now, but we'll dive into that later, of course, in the conversation. But just to give everyone kind of a sense of where you are right now after graduating.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Brad Reed, as the title says under my face there. I was a police officer for 11 years in Connecticut, and then last year I joined the Full Stack Boot Camp in May. I was supposed to join April and had some weird back end issues that forced me to move over into May. So I did the Full Stack Boot Camp from May to October 4th is when I graduated last year. And I got hired at my first tech job at the Home Depot. I was working on the front end of the My Account space on their website in September, so right before I graduated. So I've been a developer for pretty much exactly a year now. Since then, I've moved on. I'm now a mobile developer with a company called Map Your Show, where I make mobile apps in React Native for big conferences, the big tech conferences, big farming conferences, anything that you can think of. And yeah, it's great. I actually work with another New Camp alumni who got hired shortly after I did. So, the prospects are out there. Kristen Woodward actually works with me now.
Oh, that's awesome. And I know you posted a few links to jobs at Home Depot and maybe this startup as well. Is that after you posted that link that the New Camp graduate got hired as well?
Actually, that one was in the hiring process. I was being hired to expand the team, and a member of the team left while I was in the process. So then the recruiting agency they were using at the time asked me if I knew anyone, and Kristen was the first one to get back to me. So she got the job.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. So let me also share for anyone out there who's kind of curious about Brad's journey, let me share your LinkedIn profile because it really shows your journey from being a police officer, a CIS police officer, right? Crime scene investigator, I think. Is that correct?
Not really. I did that, but I was still in patrol. We don't have dedicated crime scene people in Connecticut. It's not really a thing up here. But yeah, I did a lot of forensic photography towards the end. I was doing, if a crime scene was big enough that the patrol officer couldn't handle it, but not big enough to call the detective bureau in, and I was working, I would be going over there and doing it. So,
all right. So yeah, that's all on your LinkedIn profile. So let's dive into the conversation. You have accumulated a huge amount of experience interviewing, getting your first job, getting your second job, teaching others. Can you actually go back to the very first position you got at Home Depot and And can you really go deep into the process of first searching that very first job? And I mean, the title of the Campfire is Ace Your Tech Interview with Confidence. Share with us the amount of confidence you had at the time. How did you handle that? We always talk about the imposter syndrome. How did you handle that? But let's go back to that beginning. You're very fresh. Actually, you haven't finished graduating yet, the boot camp, and you're looking for positions. What
Yeah.
did you do? How did it feel, and things like that?
So it was quite a daunting task. And I was applying, according to LinkedIn, just on LinkedIn, I applied to 216 jobs through LinkedIn, but I was also applying to jobs on Indeed, on Cyber Coders. So I racked up somewhere around like 300 job applications before I got a call back. And I was, as my cousin would probably say, and I think he's in here, I was being obnoxious on social media about everything I was learning, posting all the time.
Yeah.
And I actually was talking about how I was having trouble getting hired, and I was getting rejection letters talking about like they didn't want to hire me because I was a police officer, talking about how they saw my work history as quote unquote problematic, which is exactly what they said on one email. And
Really?
then
You
yeah.
got an email actually stating that?
Mhm. And another rejection told me that the team wasn't going to feel comfortable working with someone like me, and that was how they worded it. And then I never heard back again. And so I was complaining about that on LinkedIn because, like I said, I was being as public as possible. And then I got hooked up with a guy who was a developer, a new developer, probably just a year in, like where I am right now, and he got me in contact with a friend of his that was a state trooper out in Colorado who was actually working as a Java recruiter, and I knew a little bit of Java, so we talked, and he called me one day. He's like, "Hey, Home Depot has this job. They kind of want full stack, but he's like, if you can't do it, they might take you anyway." I was like, "Sure." And then we went through the whole thing. I went through the basic interview with the recruiting office, with the account manager from the recruiting office, trying to prep me for the interview. And the whole thing was supposed to be, they're like, "Oh, we want backend, we want a Java developer." And then I get into the interview, and the senior front end developer is interviewing me. So I've been preparing for a Java interview, and it's going to be completely in React, which was great to start off. And if I'm perfectly honest, I felt okay because at the time I was still in the boot camp, so I was still actively learning and picking things up. It was during my Node course, but he was asking me questions. There were actually things that I got wrong and that I didn't know the answer to, and they hired me anyway. And this is something I tell my students now: is like, I didn't try to make up answers. I didn't try to dance around it. I was just, I've actually never heard of that. Could you give me an example of how that would be used? And he would type some. It was over Teams, so he would type over some quick code in the Teams chat. And then I would go over like how my brain connected. So I was like, "Oh, it's similar to like this paradigm, or I can use it doing this." And he's like, and he would tell me, that it's correct, or no, it would be more like this. And so we went over things like that. And the feedback I got was, even though I wasn't where they wanted me to be, they felt like they would be able to help me grow as a developer. So they appreciated that I was willing to admit that I didn't know, and that I was, when I didn't know something, I was asking to learn it. And that was something that really stood out to them. So that's how I ended up with that job.
That's awesome. There's a few things here, and there's a ton of questions already, so we're gonna
Oh
we're
yeah.
gonna get to that. Networking. I mean, I know every campfire we talk about networking, but that's another example of building that relationship with that friend that then said, "Hey, I know Home Depot is hiring." Kind of got you the foot into the door. Did you apply through the official process to Home Depot, or were you introduced to the hiring manager at Home Depot?
So I went through a hiring agency called Optimy
Yeah,
Staffing,
yeah,
because I was a contractor. So they did all of that. They handled that. While I was there, I did actually apply to a few jobs internally that I still haven't heard back from.
yeah.
So they are hiring. They're just a little slow.
Yeah, yeah. But were you introduced to that agency? Like, how did you get in touch with that agency? Like, how was your resume? Identified, or how was your resume picked up versus any
So
other resume at the time?
the person that contacted me on LinkedIn and said his buddy was a former state trooper who worked as a recruiter there. He had the recruiter DM me on LinkedIn and send me an email, and he asked for my resume. I sent it over. They took a look. We then had a call, talked about my skill levels, talked about the things I felt comfortable with. And, he told me he was mostly a Java developer, so he may not be as much help as I would like, but we were able to get this job because it was a full stack listing for Java, Spring Boot backend, and React and all that.
And then it turned out to be a React job. And then you were very genuine in your conversation, in what you knew, what you did not. And that's what I'm hearing is not only your skills help, but showing you being genuine like that and open and transparent and willing to learn really kind of sealed the deal.
Yeah, and that's what came back in their feedback, was that they really liked that I was willing to learn anything that I didn't know and that I was asking questions. And you'll see people post all the time, number one way to lose a job in job interviews, don't ask the company questions. So I came in with my own questions, and obviously the technical questions for things that I may have gotten wrong or didn't know that I had asked helped as well.
Great. So we're going to take a few questions. I want to talk about being genuine in the interview, because there's a few advice that are given today in the internet, actually suggesting to aspiring developer that they should actually just bluntly lie and fake it. And I want to address that. I want to talk about that. So let's actually look. There's a ton of questions from either students or prospects here. I mean, folks are really surprised, right? Caesar is saying what, why, and that's in relationship with you getting decline letters because you actually used to be a police officer, and just saying, hey, I would think that detective skills would be beneficial, especially to find bugs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if do you want to address that? Like, why the stigma? I am also very surprised. Like, in my mind, there's a huge amount of respect to have to the profession at large.
Yeah, it has to do with, I know when I was growing up, there was a comment that people would make, you were only a cop because you could only get C's in school and things like that. And like, I have a master's degree in forensic science. I went to college. I speak 3 languages, and that's not that out of the realm of possibility for most cops where I am now, because there are some departments that require degrees. I worked with other people who had master's degrees, just not in forensic science, like criminal justice, police administration, things like that. And we're all patrol officers on the road. Mm-hmm. So it's something that people just have in their mind that, they assume you're not going to be smart enough, or it's, in some cases, it's a culture thing. They just don't like cops, so they're not willing to hire you, which I'm sure some of it was, but that's not information I have to really say yes or no to. But that's probably where a lot of like my no calls came from too.
Yeah, I imagine. So we have Daria as well, stating how much she really appreciates your career and how that resonates with her.
Yeah, it's been, after doing something for over a decade, it's very hard, because that also, changing careers, a lot of people question you, because whenever I would get an interview, the second it was brought up that I was, a police officer at the time, it would derail the entire interview for at least 5 minutes.
Yeah, they would have tons of additional questions, and nothing related to the job at hand. So would you mind? Yes, you are an instructor. Yes. Do you mind actually talking about that a little?
Absolutely. So I actually started out teaching at New Camp as a React Native instructor, which is now what I work in at Map Your Show. But currently, I was working with Python instructor Todd Sparrow on building a course for job hunting, for resume review, for networking, how to get yourself out there. And we're currently at the very end of the very first run of that course, the job hunting bootcamp. Tomorrow is actually our last workshop. So last week we did mock interviews. Tomorrow we're doing whiteboarding. So, making them do live coding. And a lot of it has been, it's a less technical course to teach, but a lot of it is talking about like the psychology of interviewing and talking about questions that are designed to derail your line of thinking and throw you off to see if you can still handle it. So, I unfortunately did that to my students last week. In the middle of a question, be like, okay, so now do this. But, they, after 3 weeks, they started to expect things like that. And we've gotten some pretty good feedback from it. There's one student, I make him go first every time, because like, he'd be talking about things that he enjoys, and he's perfect, he's solid. The second he starts trying to talk about himself or his experience, I could hear his voice like shaking a little bit. And I was like, so you realize that I'm making you do this because I want you to get used to this while we're here, so that because I can hear it. I'm a musician, so I might hear it more than somebody else, but I can hear that you're nervous, and it's okay to be nervous. We just got to work on it a little bit. And we talk about things like that, and a lot of long conversations about things like job scams, because
we need to talk about that as well at some point.
I've posted many times in the New Camp community. Like, I look at jobs that people have questions about, and I found
that's your detective history of really seeing the scam. Probably the first one to see when a scam is popping on the radar.
Well, I had one that I applied to that turned out to be a scam. So nobody is immune. The difference is, at the time I was still a police officer, and they totally missed that in my resume, and I absolutely messed with them. And I found it exactly where they were and used it against them. And the reaction was hilarious. But I tell people, if you have a question, send it to me, because you'll be out thousands of dollars, and it's not worth it.
So, wow, there's so much that I want to go over. Let's see the other questions here. And then I want to talk about those scams. I actually have a list here, and I want to pop some. And I want you to actually share some of the examples that you've seen as well. And we should talk about the job hunting bootcamp as well, and go through what we're teaching students. Jamal is at Home Depot. Awesome. Congrats, Jamal.
Yeah, even as a contractor there, it was hard for me. I was there for 8 months of a 6-month contract, so do the math, and I still didn't get a full-time job there.
Yeah, but then you got, well, maybe we talk about that first. Let's see. Geez. Oh, really? Okay, hold on.
Yes.
I just saw
Speaking
that.
of scams.
I need to, yes, exactly, right? Block user on YouTube. I think that's pretty fair. Okay, block user on YouTube.
That was very well timed.
Yeah, there you go. Can I delete? I don't know. Are those texts still on YouTube? Can they still see them? I don't know.
I can see them on the restream. I don't know about
Add to block list and restream chat. There we go. Boom. All right. Yeah, it's gone now. Awesome. So let's talk about, before we go into the scam, before we go into describing the job hunting bootcamp, let's talk about how you went from your first job at Home Depot and the experience that you just described to us to actually get that job, the 200 plus resume sent, to get your second job, and kind of highlight the differences between getting your first job and getting your second job. Okay. Well, and first, share with us, what is that second position that you're in right now?
So currently I work as a mobile developer at a company called Map Your Show. It's a smaller company that does a lot more business than they used to. So we're always busy. That's cool. I work in React Native, making mobile apps for conferences. And then, I've been there since May, and I got hired there actually through another staffing agency. But while I was at Home Depot, I wasn't really actively looking for a job because, I didn't mind it there, but I was a contractor. So I had no days off. I had no benefits, nothing like that. And I got contacted out of the blue. And I'll tell you that once you hit 6 months at your first job, you get contacted nonstop by recruiters. Even ones that
hold on. Say that again. Once you
hit 6 months in the industry, you are contacted 5-6 times a day, calls, 1,100 emails a day. I mean, I think today I got 14 emails. Some of them were probably for the same job, but most of them were for jobs that I'm not even remotely qualified for. So you have to filter them a little bit, but this was one of those. I got an email. It's like, hey, we have a React Native job. And I enjoyed React Native the most when I was doing the boot camp. So I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a try. But I was making decent money for a junior at Home Depot. So I was like, I told them, I said, you have to pay me more, or I'm not doing it. And I got paid a little bit more and got a full-time position. So now I have benefits, I have days off, and it's great.
So, and when you get all those offers, how many of them are legit? Do you know? Like, you have a good sense? Like, do you feel like, what's the percentage?
I don't read a lot of them anymore, but I want to say, so the way a lot of recruiting agencies work is the recruiters themselves get paid per connection. So every email they send out, every connection they make on LinkedIn is how they're getting paid. So a lot of them are going to be senior jobs, even though you have 3 months of experience, or they're going to be cloud architect jobs when I know I was a front end developer. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But you will get a lot. I do get a lot of probably, I want to say like 60-ish%, front end jobs, mobile jobs. I actually got one today for a C# mobile developer for Xamarin. And I was just looking at, my first thought was, who even uses that anymore?
Yeah.
And then moved on from there. But, ones like that are probably more legit because that means they actually read your resume.
Yeah. Yeah. Xamarin, if people don't know, it's actually a technology that was way ahead of its time. Like, I don't know how many years ago now, though. 10 years
Like
ago?
10
maybe?
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Bought by Microsoft. So my Microsoft friends, I remember when Xamarin joined the fold, and it's kind of doing what, Cordova was doing, React Native is doing, Ionic is doing. It's kind of trying to have a write once, deploy everywhere for mobile type of approach.
Yeah, but most people are using React Native or Flutter now.
That's right. Albert has a question here.
Yes. So when you go into a job, so perfect example, I'll bring up my Home Depot interview again. I went in, I asked them, what their tech stack looks like. And I asked them about like certain versions because I know different Node versions can cause issues. As we saw last year in New Camp, we upgraded Node and everything just imploded. And I asked them like what a typical day looks like. What does their development cycle look like? And we talked about their agile cycle that they do 2-week sprints. And then at the end of a sprint, you'd either be done, or if you weren't, you weren't, because they were, as big of a company as they were very good about understanding that sometimes things just don't work and you need more time. Mm-hmm. But they stuck to the agile cycle of, a release every 2 weeks, things tied to epics, and then reporting to a product manager who reported to a project manager, et cetera, et cetera. And those were good questions, talking about structure, talking about what their development cycle is, what they use, how they use it, how things are implemented. Specifically asking them things about Redux, because Redux, as most of us who've gone through the boot camp know, Redux is one of the hardest things to learn.
So let's see if we can make a list real quick for Albert and the folks out there.
Yeah.
Ask about the versions of their software, right? Which version? I mean, you're using React, but which one? Node, which one? And know kind of the differences, if you want to actually elaborate on that. Ask about how they organize the projects, right? Do they have sprints? Are they agile? How many people on the project? I can throw in, like, how do they do testing? Like, they have a dev team, a test team? How do they do deployment? Where do they deploy? Do they deploy on the cloud, on premises? What's the deployment kind of approach there?
That was actually a question I did ask too, was about deployment, because I have friends who work, that have to be working at 11 o'clock at night because they're deploying. So I was like, all right, I know this is something that happens in the industry. How do you guys handle deployments? And, they were talking about how they have their own team for that. And so those are good questions.
Yeah. How about asking about code reviews? Like, what's the path to publish, in production? And
that's a very good question to ask that I didn't. But it's something, when I got there, with the size of the code base, it's Home Depot, it's massive. Yeah. The size of that code base, it was something I probably should have asked, because it would just, even logging into the repo, you're just staring at it like, oh my God.
What kind of repo actually? Was it Git, or was it something kind of obscure? What was kind of, I don't know if you can.
At Home Depot, they had a Git enterprise server, and then at Map Your Show, we use GitHub.
Okay, perfect. Let's see if we have other questions here. Good job changing careers. Kind of overwhelming, especially doing this at 52 years old. I've not been interviewed for over 20 years. Yeah, what would be your advice for GM?
So for changing careers, like I mentioned before, sometimes people aren't going to necessarily take you seriously. So you have to really come in with good knowledge, good questions, be able to, have code to show. So I talk about, actually in the course, talk about like not just LinkedIn, having a good LinkedIn presence or having good networking, but also having a good GitHub page. So, like my GitHub homepage, I have very specific and strategically placed repos that pop up on the front. And then I have 30 repos of all sorts of other random things. but there's certain ones that you want at the top. You want like your best ones in the top left. You want to have something that shows different languages, because on GitHub they use different colors or so different languages. So when someone loads it, they don't even have to read it. They can just see a bunch of different colored dots, so they know that, oh, these are things that you know and that you have used because you've committed the repo. And so like my current job, before I even went into the second interview, the tech interview, they ripped apart my GitHub. They went through and looked at everything, looked at specifically my React Native project, but right on the front page, because I knew I was going for that job, I had that as one of my starred repos, and then I had a TypeScript repo, a Java repo, a C# repo, all just right there up front, so people can see everything that you have done and the best things that you have to show.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So I want to take Albert's question here, and I will use it to kind of have a conversation with you around being genuine. One time I received a call from the employer, and they asked how much experience do I have, and I said I'm still in the boot camp. They said okay, and hang up the phone. How do I go about this? Go for it, and then I'll add on top of that.
So I actually, when I was still in boot camp, I actually interviewed with one company, and they went about it. They actually told me they were looking for someone with experience, but if they had, depending on who they hired and what the budget was, they might take on a student. So they kept me on the short list. You basically, if it's a company that's not even going to hear you out, don't deal with them. Move on to someone else, apply somewhere else, because they're not going to be worth your time. I can tell you right now that even if they call you back, you'll probably get paid less than other people, just because that's how they think. And a lot of people see boot camps as a negative, but I've seen things. I know Steve Viarsa has posted this before, people talking about how, if you have a degree, you get hired because you know all of the background information, how everything works. If you have a boot camp, you get hired because you were actually writing code.
Yeah. So
that's something to really lean into.
So I really agree with that. And I will say, for me, it matters, as a hiring manager, I will say, it matters to be genuine. And one of the things that's going on right now in the industry is actually encouraging students in coding boot camps to lie about them being in coding boot camps. And there's actually a few ways that it's being done. And I want to talk about that. There's one way that it's being done is by creating fake companies on LinkedIn, describing those companies as being agencies, dev agencies, telling students to add those fake companies and declare that they are employees, and that they are software engineers at those companies. So that on your resume, you are a software engineer at a company that's an agency, and you're not a coding bootcamp student, even though you're still in the bootcamp. I feel it's a very disingenuous way of doing it. It exposes you, if you're thinking about doing something like that, it really exposes you to very complicated conversations that you're going to have with people who expect you to be genuine, and you'll be found out, and you'll be in a really complicated situation. And of course, depending on how much you do value being genuine yourself, you may be okay or not with it. But I think it's really a decision that's very challenging to anyone. But I would really encourage anyone who wants to have a long-term career in the field to be as genuine as possible. Because one thing that you and I talked about, and that's being said a lot, is a lot of the jobs you're going to get is through networking. And being genuine is a key to successful networking. And if you're actually networking and being disingenuous, you're going to actually burn a ton of bridges. And the catchphrase, this is a small world. It is everywhere a small world. And that's going to actually follow you. So that's one way of that it's happening. There's another way that it's happening in the industry right now, where you work on your project and you declare that that project, that GitHub project, is actually a company, or it's actually a full-blown open source project with tons of contributions, and you kind of misstate your actual role, the fact that it was a student project and things like that. Be careful with what you hear and how much, and protect your integrity, I will say, as much as you can, as much as you feel comfortable with it. Protect your integrity and don't let lies or deceit be the way you actually get into the industry. My spiel on it.
Yeah, for that, there's something actually we talked about in classes. So I know you'll see a lot of people complaining about this. You submit a resume, but then you have to fill out a job application, put all the same information down. And there is a legal reason for that. A resume is not a legal document that can hold you to, so you can say whatever you want on it. Whatever you decide is right, even if it's not. And they can fire you over that, which is fine because you lied. But if they then have you do a job application, you have to sign those. That becomes a legal binding document, which they can 100% in every state fire you over because you've now lied on a legal document. And that can cause some serious issues for future employment too.
I didn't know that. That's a very good point. So whatever you write on your LinkedIn is kind of, you can't really be legally in trouble for that. But the minute you submit something to those companies' internal systems, that's when,
once you sign it, you own it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great to have Don watching the show. Yeah, that's a conversation I had with Don actually, and glad you're enjoying the topic. Yeah, Kearney, very dangerous to lie during an interview. Yeah, you're fired on the spot. And I'm seeing those situations play out right now where people have been told to lie. And now they're like, hey, there's going to be a background check happening because I got the job. What do I do? And they're freaking out. They're just freaking out because they just lied. They're not software engineers at that company. And they're like, hey, are you going to verify my past employment at your company? And it's crickets, obviously. Very, very challenging situations. Yeah. So let's talk about other aspects of what to look for. We just talked about what you should be careful about as an applicant, as a person who's seeking a job, wanting to network, wanting to be as genuine as possible in your search. But then sometimes you're confronted with situations or opportunities that seem too good to be true. I'll actually share a few here. Or just kind of too weird. Let me share that one. So on my screen, we have, okay, so this one.
So currently you were showing my LinkedIn profile.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's not what I want to show. Dang it. Hold on. There we go. Oh, I need to show the entire screen. That's probably why. Window. There we go. No, that's what I want to show. Perfect. So a lot, and we have Krista saying hi. We have can you see it? Is that big enough? Let's see if I can actually, there we go. So there's a ton of job opportunities that are disguised and they're actually trying to sell you something. So you're not going to be an employee, you're going to be a student, or going to be actually asked to pay for one of those, like, I notice you're looking for that kind of position, go to my website, do those things for me, and you'll get, maybe there's a fake position at the end, and all you want is actually giving your email, name, phone number. Sometimes they're actually building their own job platform and you just became a member without really realizing it. So that's one of those. One that I'm seeing as well, there are people, and I don't know if that profile is real or not. HR from Walmart looking for another company altogether. There are profiles of individuals or companies that are just going to seek for a front man or a front woman. And you've seen some of that maybe, Brad, where it's going to be about, we actually need you to be the face of the relationship that we're going to build with the customer. We'll pay you a fee, but any communication, any conversation will have to be between that customer and you, and we'll actually work in the background to deliver the goods. Have you seen that one, Brad?
That one I haven't seen. I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it as much. I've gotten a few requests for people asking to purchase my Upwork page, which I don't even have one, and things like that. Or the big ones I see are they're copying and pretending to be a real company, and then the email you're sending things to is a Gmail. Or I got an email saying I was moving on in the process for something I never applied for, and they asked me to, pull down their API so I can get the instructions for the code test. I just laughed and deleted the emails. No.
One of the few rules that will need to be a warning for people kind of in that situation. What are the things that you may be asked to do that should really pretty much tell you, hey, hold on a second, I really need to think it through. It may be a scam and may be in danger.
Yep. So the ones that I've seen, they actually reuse basically the exact same language in almost all of them, and it's ripped right from IBM's internship program.
Oh, wow.
That's a very popular scam, as they post it, and it talks about how you will be a part-time employee and you'll make $30 an hour for while you're training and $60 an hour when you're not, once you've completed the training. And I've talked to a few new camp students who've seen the exact same job posting for different companies. And what they do is they go on LinkedIn and they pull names of actual executives from that company and say, oh, you're going to be talking to this person or this person, and they spoof emails. But a lot of the times they'll still have the one I got was that I went through was for a company called TRC Companies, and they had someone's name at trccompanies.gmail.com, or they'll try to disguise it as much as possible, or the links will have there's a Unicode character that has no actual display space. It's just a blank character that doesn't take up any space. So you'll see things like that if you pop it up in an editor. That one's a little bit harder, but if you're suspicious, you can see that in the link, and that's usually a sign that it's going to take you somewhere that's not real. They'll want to do interviews on things like Google Hangouts. That's not something anybody uses. They talk a lot about, they'll send you sometimes they'll actually send you a written personality test, which is something legitimate jobs do. I've taken many personality tests for actual companies, and they'll basically not read it and just send it back. Oh, you're going to move on in the process, and you only ever contact someone through email. You've never spoken to anybody. Those are all bad. The big ones are, we're going to give you a stipend to buy your own home office.
Oh yes, that one I've read as well.
The amount is usually somewhere around $5,000. I think it's $5,200 something dollars. And they'll send you a check that'll be made out from some random other, not that company, which is how I more or less caught the ones that I had, because I don't ever do this, but I intentionally, because I had legal assistance and I was a police officer at the time, I was able to investigate things and get search warrants and everything. Had the check cashed, and then had the account that was cashed again immediately closed, so that it would show where the money went to, even though there was no actual money, but where it was being cashed out of. So they'll send you that. There'll be a very specific list of materials they want you to buy
from a specific website, right? Because pretty much what they're doing is they're sending you to their own website to buy with your own money stuff over there, and you'll never see
and they send you a fake check.
Yeah, the check is going to bounce.
And then and then what they do is they use that check. If you put it in, they're going to ask you to do an ATM deposit, which don't ever do that. Yeah. But they're going to put that check in, and they're going to use the information they get back from the canceled check on your account to then put your debit card on an old gift card, because I can't tell you the number of people in my time as a police officer arrested with gift cards that had debit card numbers on them. Yeah, on the magnetic stripe. So they'll put it on that, and they'll go use it. And that's how I figured out exactly where those guys were in Detroit. And I told them, what ATM they were trying to use the card at, which all of a sudden the emails were disabled after I did that. but they do things like that. They'll talk about, you can buy yourself this specific desk, this monitor, buy yourself a Mac Pro. Specifically, it's always a Mac Pro for some reason, and all those kinds of that kind of information. And then a lot of times they'll pick companies that are real companies or were but aren't anymore. And certain job search sites are better at catching them than others. I know LinkedIn's a little bit better, but like Indeed is terrible.
And usually I would say, I mean, if the interview process of the hiring process is actually way too fast, if it takes like 48 hours or even 4 days to be hired,
Right.
if you really feel like you haven't been really interviewed that much, like usually you're gonna have 1, 2 interviews, 3, 4. But if for that particular job, you get an email interview and then they pretty much brush over things over 15 minutes on the phone, and all of a sudden you're hired, big warning sign, right? A proper hiring
Absolutely.
process is going to take a couple of weeks. You're going to speak with a few people. They're not going to ask you immediately for your social security number or details or ask you to buy anything. So pretty much it needs to be as traditional as possible in a way in terms of hiring process. If it's not, warning sign. Let me, and we have a few more questions here. I want to get back to those questions. One last thing, though, I want to share that last one, which is kind of interesting one, I think. Found on LinkedIn, and at first I really didn't understand it. No, it's not the one. Hold on a sec. Oops. Where is it? Oh, that's the one. CEO in training. That's the new one that I just saw.
I saw that today.
You've seen it today?
Yep. Someone added me on LinkedIn and he mentioned that he's a CEO, but then if you actually look at it, he says he's an intern at this company. And what that is it's another one of those, he's creating a fake company to try to stand out.
So CEO in training, it's actually a LinkedIn job opportunity. And there's a ton of those, for software engineers and things like that, where it's not a job opportunity, it's a training. And you're not going to be the CEO of that company. You're going to be trained to become CEO. So you really want to be careful. It reads like, what you will be doing, what you will not be doing, candidate requirement. It feels like it's an actual job. And you'll find many also for software engineers, as I said, but it's not. It's actually a training. All right, so maybe we stop with the fake stuff. Let's go back to the questions and your experience right now at your current company. Are you also hiring people? Are you now part of the hiring loop?
I'm not, but they asked me when I was in the process if I knew anyone, so we hired another new camp grad, and then while I was there, they made the decision to ditch the hiring agency because those are expensive for a small company and started to hire direct. So we had we had 3 new camp grads interview for a front end dev position there. And the full stack team, they were usually traditionally only hiring people with college degrees, but they had, I think, 4 interviews with boot camp grads, not from new camp, just in general. So that team contacted me to ask, what are the kinds of things we can expect boot camp grads to know, because we've never interviewed people like that. And so I'm not directly involved, but I help if the hiring managers have questions about the kinds of things you learn in boot camp, the way that it's taught, some things that you should be expected to know, and some of the harder things that you may not be expected to have learned unless you learned it on your own.
Yeah, makes sense. There's a quick question from Albert. Should I send money to a prince on the other side of the world? No, probably not. Jamal is asking, what is better for coding, Mac or Windows? Either is great for coding.
Personal preference.
Compatibility issues, but I think that has been solved with M1 Macs. There were a few pieces of software that would work not as well.
Still,
yeah.
I have an M1 Mac for work, and there's still some issues every now and then. Our Xcode version doesn't really like to play with the terminal at all. So we end up with 2 different types of terminals opening all the time.
And then Albert is asking, will I get a job by April 2023? It's a very tough one to answer.
What I would say for advice for this is don't give yourself a hard deadline like that, because the closer you get to it, the more frantic you are. And unless you are going to run out of money and then, take whatever you can. But if you set a hard limit like that and you start approaching it, you're going to start freaking out. You're going to start applying to things that you're not going to want to do, and you're going to start stressing more than you need to. And the more you stress, the worse you're going to perform in those interviews.
Yeah, that's a great point. Hey, so let's actually talk about the job hunting bootcamp. You just you're about to finish teaching it. This Saturday is going to be the last week.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go over week by week, if you don't mind, and let's talk about what you experienced with your class. I'm actually pulling right now the website where we have a week by week here. There we go. So let me share that. Hold on a sec.
Yep.
All right. So this is job hunting. Oh no, yeah, I'm not sharing just yet. There we go. 4 weeks. Any graduate can attend. Like this is not just for new camp graduates. It's for pretty much anyone who has a coding experience. Like we're not going to teach you coding in this bootcamp, right? It's only 4 weeks where we're going to talk about, data structure and algorithm, but really from the perspective of you being tested on those. So would you mind, Brad, actually walking us through, these 4 weeks and pretty much share with us, what did you teach your students during those 4 weeks?
Yep. So week 1, it's called First Impressions. It's all talking about things like what is your elevator pitch? And for those people that may not know what that is, an elevator pitch is what are you sending to someone as a cold contact to get them interested in talking to you? So it's about like, they call it an elevator pitch because it should be something that can take place in the span of riding an elevator. So no more than like 15, 20 seconds. So you go over things like that, talking about like, this is who I am, this is what I know. We also did reviews of each other's resumes, LinkedIn's, and GitHub pages. So I spoke before about how, like I was talking about with my class, the GitHub homepage that shows, my best work as well as language diversity for the things that I know the best. And then talking about how to structure like a LinkedIn page, how to really, put yourself out there and network with people. And a few of my students actually didn't really have one actually was a GitLab person, which I haven't seen that before, but that was interesting. Mm-hmm. Didn't really have LinkedIn pages, so we helped them build that out and get out there and introduce yourself to people doing that. Week 2 was more about how to look for jobs. What are you looking for? What are you doing? Keep in mind what you need to learn. And talk about things like freelancing opportunities, build something for someone local. Everybody needs a website. So if you know web development, go see if someone needs a website. Talking about getting out there in local meetups. So I know a lot of communities have dev meetups. I've seen people, actually, I think Albert was talking about it, local dev meetups in your area. And, really talking about like what you do, what you know, and who else might be able to help you along the way. Week 3 was more interview practice. So there were some leak code problems thrown in during the week to get people used to the fact that you're going to get those thrown at you. And then we did mock interviews with a heavy focus on not the tech questions, but the soft skills, because a lot of times you'll see, someone might be technically proficient, but they don't have the communication skills to really thrive. So, we really discussed that and threw those questions in there. And then I had to be myself and throw people off with, certain questions and talking about getting ready to, answer technical questions. We did 1 technical question per student, and then we had some extra time, so we ran through some more, but, really diving into those answers. And because this isn't a technical boot camp, like one of my students, he answered in C#, which thankfully I knew C#, but the other students didn't. So they really didn't understand his answer. So we had to go over that, but he was able to, and getting him used to explaining his thought process. And then most of them are Python or JavaScript. So I can, help along with the JavaScript, but one of them answered something in Python. And I was looking at it, I was like, I have no idea what that is. So, then forcing him to explain it to me when, it's similar to something in Java, but it was in Python. And I just made him explain it to get him used to explaining it, because you're going to have to do that.
That's a great practice, like really explaining in plain English an algorithm, right? What is the code doing in plain English?
Mhm.
It's often used to actually write the code. When you think of the code first, you actually think about it in English. You don't think, in code. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and while he was doing that, and as he was ending, he was doing the Fibonacci sequence, printing that out in Python.
Oh yeah.
So then, like right before he ended, I said, "Okay, can you do it for pi, like the first 6 digits of pi?" And I just, intentionally throwing people for a loop because that's going to happen. I'd rather you get used to that than just freeze in an interview. And then tomorrow for our last one, we're going to do technical whiteboarding, which is you're going to be given the reins and you're going to be told to solve a problem live. And I can tell you one of the worst things is coding with someone watching you. You can do it all day long, but the second someone's standing over your shoulder, or in this case, watching your screen or taking control of your screen, you will make mistakes. And obviously most interviewers know that. It's just getting over things like that and talking about solving these more complex problems live that aren't just like can you explain this, a quick oral technical question. It's really writing the code and being able to do that in an interview setting.
That's awesome. And for people wondering, the next session is scheduled for October 24th. So it's in about 10 days. In 10 days, we'll deliver another one of those. Brad may be your instructor. And so we hope to see you there. You wanted to say something, Brad?
Oh, I was just going to say, as long as we have one. Right now I'm teaching on Pacific time because we combine a bunch, but if you're on the East Coast, you're more likely to get me there.
That's right. Yeah. So let's take a few additional questions. I think you sort of answered that one from Jess. What type of questions do you ask during an interview? But the second question, do you have a good resource? Like, do you know any good website that will kind of help you prepare for asking questions, or what are the questions that you're going to be asked?
Yep. So not really a website, but a lot of the times you'll see people posting that on LinkedIn, like good questions to ask your interviewer, or this is language specific, but there's a company called JavaScript Works that I just gave to someone. They do a lot of stuff in London and the European Union, but they do have American jobs, but they also do projects. They do, here are interview questions, here are things you might see. As far as resources, just like make sure you know the docs of whatever language it is that because that's going to be your best resource anyway, because they're going to ask you questions off of those, like life cycle methods was a question I've gotten before. They're going to ask you, how do life cycle methods work? They're going to ask you like things about global variables. So you want to really try to dive into that. There's I don't remember the name of it, but there are some on LinkedIn that really like drive in, like, these are questions you want to ask because this is what your employer is looking for.
How would you be looking for those on LinkedIn? Do you do like a Google site search for those questions, and then you end up on
you can do interview questions for like the interviewee or things like that, or questions to ask your interviewer are good searches, because then it shows it won't be as industry specific if you search it that way too.
Yeah. Let me share a secret to folks, and many may actually know it already, but it's good to remind people that you can actually limit a search to specific websites. So if I do site linkedin.com and then I do technical questions, it's only going to bring back results from linkedin.com, right? 10 unexpected interview questions to get. So you can actually find a ton of good articles and pretty much find the links that you were referring to here, just by restricting your search to a specific website like this, site linkedin.com or site indeed.com or whatever else. All right. There's a few additional questions here. I think that's a really interesting one. Thank you, Albert, by the way, for asking all those great questions. Should I apply to jobs that are bootcamp instructor positions, even though I've never been in the field? You've never been an instructor?
I would, yeah. So technically, my first tech job was being an instructor at UCamp for React Native, because my instructor, I was always helping people with the problems. So my instructor really pushed for it, and we needed React Native instructors at the time. So, go for it. I mean, you've done it, so why not?
Yeah,
You've
I
done
mean,
the
take
work.
the plunge. It's a great um, opportunity to get some practice as well. It's a great way to get a first job, a real legit first job in the industry. And I mean, of course, you need to feel comfortable with what you're going to teach, and you need to feel comfortable about your knowledge of the technology. You're going to teach that technology. So I would say make sure before you deliver the first course or you actually teach to really prepare yourself. I think that's something you don't want to miss. Whatever you're going to teach, prepare yourself. I mean, be the student of what you're going to teach first. Make sure that you know it really well, so that you actually feel pretty good in front of your students. As I said to our instructors, the new camp instructors, the worst thing that can happen as an instructor is students realizing that the instructor is not prepared. Um, and they're going to know it pretty fast. Like if they ask you a question about, what's the in the third paragraph of that exercise, and you kind of feel lost, you don't know where that exercise is, and you've never seen it before, they're going to know it. They're going to know it. And so, yeah, go for it. I would say go for the instructor position. Make sure that you know your stuff. Make sure that you prepare yourself. But it's a great way to get a first position. All right. Really great to have you, Albert. Um, we're almost at the end of the stream. What can you tell us, Brad, about what you're seeing out there in the industry and with students? What do you see any trend? Do you see any situations that you wish maybe aspiring developer will know about or will prepare better for? What can you share about us with us on
Sure.
this?
So I see a lot of people are really, really upset about like the big tech firms are doing a lot of layoffs. Like I know
Mhm.
Meta is laying off like something like 30% of their bottom performers or whatever it is. But what a lot of people think is like, they see all these big tech firms are laying a bunch of people off. So they start freaking out, thinking that they're not going to be able to find a job. But you really need to look at, like, my first job was at Home Depot working on their website. Everybody has a website. And a lot of these places are hiring a lot because quite a few times people will use them as a stepping stone to get to like Meta or Microsoft or Apple or whatever. So look for some of those, not necessarily smaller jobs, but jobs you might not think of. So, like, if there's a restaurant chain, they need a website. I know we have boot camp graduates that work for Activision Blizzard, for Target. I used to work for Home Depot, for Walmart, working on all their websites. So, they're not big tech companies, but it's a tech job. And, sometimes a lot of people are, they ask, yeah, I can't really land a dev job. What can I do to get my foot in the door? And a lot of times look at like QA positions, because if you know the technical side of things, you might be able to get better answers back to the devs and then might be able to make it onto the dev team. I've seen a few people talk about like project management positions, but that requires like other certifications and things. So it's a little bit harder. Um, yeah, just really keep in mind that just because some companies are laying off doesn't mean that everybody is. And
Yeah, no, it's so true. The headlines, of course, are confusing folks. If you look at the labor statistics, which I did a few weeks ago, and you actually look at the predictions for uh, all industries included, not just tech companies, but all industries in the US, there's still a need for more software engineers than there are, in the market. So yes, big tech companies are announcing layoffs, but they're still hiring as well. It's not like the workforce still is growing. So don't be confused by that. I will also say that those layoffs are really one point in time. The need for engineers is going to continue to grow in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And when the recession, when all the fears around the economic situation is fading away, there's going to be a huge, huge, huge spike of demand. Right? The demand is there, is here, obliterated by the headlines, but then in 18 months, there's going to be even greater demand. And so you want to be ready for that. So pretty much you want to sign up now. You want to learn to code now to be ready for the spike in demand that's going to happen in about 12 to 18 months. There was another question here. Oh yeah, hang up. And then we're gonna wrap up actually. Whoa, it's already 4. Um, Is it possible to land an internship with New Camp? We don't offer internship, but once you graduate and you have built experience in the field, 6 months, 9 months, come back to us as an instructor. We have, Brad is a perfect example. I can name a few students who came back as instructors, and oftentimes they are best instructors because they've been in those shoes. So that's kind of how you can actually, continue to build knowledge and experience and come back to New Camp. All right. Hey, with that, Brad, I really want to thank you for taking the time to share with us your experience and how actually provide us with your insights in how to land a job and ace your tech interview. I hope to see you again. I mean, second time is great. What about the third one?
I'll
Third
be here.
time's a charm, as I say. That'll be awesome. All right. Take care, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody.